Reflect on progresses and challenges after 2 years of the Bola Tinubu administration. This time we'll look at justice reforms, or more specifically, the place of the rule of law. And it sounds like an all too familiar conversation. Does the executive obey the rule of law? Do they uphold the rule of law when they assume office? Let's have this conversation this morning. And joining us, we have Mr. Jude Udo Ilo, is the Chief Executive Officer, Hague Institute for Innovation, OG Law Hill. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Ilo, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you for having me.
Now, as I said earlier, it sounds like an all too familiar conversation under each administration. You could reflect on court cases, the arrest of politically exposed persons, detention without trial. Is it a foregone conclusion, really, that, the executive under each administration sort of turns its back on the rule of law? What are your thoughts on this?
So thank you. I think it is important to also situate this conversation on what is happening globally, where you see a tendency by a lot of countries to prioritize, in their view, the agenda of governments or the policies of government above the restraints that have been put in place by the law, by the constitution, as the case may be. And so the global backsliding of respect for rule of law is something that is quite prevalent across the world. We are seeing increasingly a number of authoritarian democracies, if I may call them that, where leaders believe that because they have the mandate of the people, or assume they have the mandate of the people, and to that extent they don't feel restrained, or they don't think they can be restrained by judges, as the case may be. And we've heard narratives like unelected people cannot tell elected people what to do. So it is a global problem. It's not just a Nigeria problem. And the tendency oftentimes is that government is often focused on getting things done as quickly as possible, getting political wins, without paying due attention to what the law says, without paying due attention to process. Now, the problem is that you can very well get things done without paying due attention to those processes. But you then create a system where every individual can decide for themselves what is in the best interest of the country, whether or not the law allows it. As long as they feel their cause is righteous, in quotes, they go ahead and do whatever they want. And so that problem is also pervasive, not just in Nigeria, but across the world. And in Nigeria, we see the tendency of government to focus more on we are getting things done than following due process, then creating a culture that puts discretion, individual discretions, above the dictates of the law. And that in itself is problematic. That in itself is dangerous for democracy.
Getting things done could be debatable. If we have more time, I'd like to follow up on that. But let's expand the conversation to the judicial space itself and look at the role of the judiciary in sort of fueling this restraints that you talk about. When we look at critical court cases and we, list, for want of time, we may not be able to list the ex parte orders that we've had in the last decade over very critical cases. They talk about forum shopping and the obtaining of certain court orders, to frustrate the justice system. What do you perceive to be the role of the judiciary itself in enhancing this restraint, this lack of restraint? I beg your pardon.
So the first thing is that the rule of law is not just about people obeying the law. It's also about the executive imposing on themselves some level of restraint. They should not necessarily exercise their power. Government officials should exercise their power with restraints. And that's where you help the courts. You don't overwhelm the courts with countless cases coming their way. But particularly to your question, I mean, the statistics are out there. The Nigerian judiciary is viewed very unfavorably by majority of Nigerians. It is hemorrhaging credibility. And I think it is an own goal, if I may call it that. It's a self-inflicted wound, because, as to your point, they've allowed people to manipulate the system with things like forum shopping. They have been inconsistent in following precedents. They have been inconsistent in holding government accountable, actually. And so it is, I think, it's more of a credibility problem for the judiciary. And what they need to do, of course, is to clean up the act. I think Nigeria has one of the best set of laws and processes and procedures. What has happened over the years is that these rules are observed more in breach than in proper compliance. And so for the judiciary to regain its place and, take back the credibility it once enjoyed, it has to clean up its acts. First of all, it has to be a court of the people in the actual sense of the word. It has to be a court of justice. It has to be, in this era of inconsistency and unpredictability of the global community, justice should be a credible, consistent, and a predictable product. And that is not happening. And again, I say it not just in Nigeria, but all over the world. And they need to make justice predictable. They need to make justice credible. And I think that's the way they can work themselves back. And also, we should not forget that there are other systems in our culture, in our country, that we can also rely on to give us justice. And I must mention that in the last polling survey we did in Nigeria, it came out clearly, speaking to more than 4,000 Nigerians, that people prefer to go to the informal justice platforms rather than go to the formal courts. That says something about the credibility of the court. That says something about the efficiency of the courts, but also gives us an opportunity to begin to look at some of these informal mechanisms of justice that our people go to and see how we can empower those systems to deliver justice for our people.
Quite a number of things to unpack, really, when you talk about the judiciary under this administration, right? But there's this bit I'd like you to speak to, because when you talk about the judiciary getting its act together, some will say, well, under Justice Kekere-Ekun, for example, we've seen 3 judges suspended by the NJC. Just some weeks ago, there was that suspension. I don't know if that came as a shock to you, or you expect more to be done. We can also talk about the workers in the judiciary. Now, this is not even just the judges. Some will tell you when they have cases, the kind of headache they go through just to secure documents, to have documents submitted, and all of those hurdles, inducements that they are subjected to in the process of seeking justice. So it's almost like there's injustice in the process or in the build-up to injustice. So if you were to have some sort of recommendations now, and I'm not even saying for President Tinubu, because the judiciary is a separate arm of government, is meant to be a separate arm of government. What would be those recommendations?
So, no, thank you. Thank you. I will take this conversation a little bit, make it a little bit broader. You see, the justice system has to be designed for people. And that is what we call people-centered justice. That you design a justice system that is much more focused on people's need, much more focused on people's interests, much more focused on people's acceptance of that system, rather than building institutions. And this is what in my organization we talk about, that it has to be people-centered justice, not institution-centered justice. And so we're having a conversation about 2 years of this administration, and you can see that we're also talking a lot about the institution, but we should be talking also about the people. What is the satisfaction level of Nigerians with the justice system? That, for me, should be the benchmark. Really. It's not whether or not the judges and justices have all they need to do their work, or we have good buildings, we have computers, we have assistants. is about the satisfaction level of the people. And you and I know that that satisfaction level is not optimal. And to then think of reform, the reform we should be thinking about is a reform that looks at what do people need? How does my auntie who lives in my village interface with the justice system? Is it close to her? Is it accessible to her? Is it understandable to her? 90% of Nigerians, according to our survey, which we did a period of 3 years, talking to the same people over and over again in those 3 years. More than 4,000 Nigerians in 18 states across 6 geopolitical zones. The question is that, the fact is that 90% of Nigerians have justice problem. Now, the critical question is, what is their satisfaction in solving that justice problem? And that is where the challenge starts. Because our justice system is not often designed around people. It's designed around systems and institutions that do not take proper account of the day-to-day justice need of the people. So my recommendation is for us to go back to the drawing board and think critically about people-centered justice, a justice system built on the needs of people, accessible to them, easy for them to understand, and this justice system that they feel they have a stake in, that they own. That would be my recommendation about moving things forward.
Very trite, and evidently the conversation has by no means ended. We must continue to, you know, drum up this and make it alive. Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Jude Udo-Ilo is the Chief Executive Officer, Hague Institute for Innovation, OG. He has joined us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you.